Welcome to Stories from the NNI. I am Lisa Friedersdorf, and I'm the Director of the National Nanotechnology Coordination Office. Today, I am joined with Martin Ben-Dayan, CEO and co-founder of MetaShield. Prior to founding MetaShield, Martin worked at retail branding giant Bonjour and as a managing director of Glory Capital, a New York City-based private equity fund. Martin, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
First of all, Lisa, thank you for having me. And sure, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I'm the father of 5 active boys. I began my career, as you mentioned, in a very large licensing and brand management company, Bonjour International, which at the time was handling over $5 billion of licensed product goods sold. From there, I transitioned to commercial real estate in New York City. I would say around 2008, around the time of the financial collapse, and shortly thereafter, things dried up in the investment world, and I began to talk with a friend of mine who ended up being my co-founder, Bill Bickmore, and we started to work on some different technologies. We were working with some very experienced retirees from large companies as consultants. Through this small research and development, we blossomed into a dynamic advanced materials company.
Well, that's great, and that's a really exciting transition. I read on your website that you produce advanced materials designed to upgrade ordinary products without adding noticeable size, weight, or any sort of visible distortion. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the technology that makes this possible?
Sure. So this is a formula platform approach, and it consists of, as you said, durable, transparent, and highly tunable coatings. And how that is possible is by using the properties of functional materials. There are a wide variety of properties that you could impart on ordinary objects without changing the product itself. These nanoparticles are very small materials, sometimes even at the atomic scale. These particles, it's hard to imagine, but when objects are very large, they have certain properties. When you shrink them down to a nanoscale, they sometimes start to take on different properties. We make coatings that are highly tunable, so we have coatings that provide UV protection, dust resistance, oil resistance, stronger glass. And to do that with a coating that's not only transparent, but 50 times thinner than a human hair really speaks to the promise of advanced materials. And the appeal to large OEMs and Fortune 500 companies is that we can improve their products without noticeably altering the appearance, and we can do it in a way that's easy to apply. Well, we're working right now with a large cosmetic OEM. They make cosmetic packagings for compacts. They have issues with fingerprints. They have issues with staining, with dust. And so we have one coating that really solves a lot of the issues that they have. So we're upgrading their product, basically not changing the product itself.
So you mentioned the application and being able to, and your website describes a little bit about the simplicity of the application and drying process. Can you share any details about how that is done?
So I would say overall, taking a step back, that the interesting thing about our technology is that the technology itself wasn't the hardest part. And the analogy that I like to use when it comes to research and development is that it's easy to get a boat to work in a swimming pool. That is to say, it's easy to get technology to work in a laboratory. I would say relatively easy. But when you take the boat into the ocean and all of the vicissitudes that come along with that and all of the challenges and the degrading factors, that is a much different challenge. And in the technology world, that is called the Valley of Death, and for good reason. That's where many startup companies and early stage technology companies fall, in bridging to the commercial world. And the analogy really isn't about just durability. It's also about viability in the B2B space. And one essential element of that is simplicity. We took an extra 18 months of time, resources, and development to make sure that our products could be compatible with the demands of high throughput manufacturing. And that not only requires an easy method like spray coating, but quick drying is essential to moving the product forward to the next step in the manufacturing process. I think one of the challenges in the advanced materials space is bridging that gap. having very cool, interesting technology, very great properties, but not being able to focus on the end. And the end is to remember that a technology company is a company. It's a commercial enterprise. And we have a business focus. We're merchants first, and we really think when we're developing the technology about the customer and how the customer can use it in the easiest way possible. And so it was a bit of a challenge to get that technology out of the lab, but thankfully we took the time and hopefully did it right.
Many of the companies that we talk to share stories about how they reached a point in the commercial development where they needed to pivot. And I read that you began in the solar market, but have shifted to glass. Could you talk about that pivot a little bit?
So we, as you mentioned, began in the solar industry. We were looking to make certain nanotechnology based films that would use the plasmonic effect of nanoparticles to help boost the efficiency of solar cells. In fact, we were successful in a niche market called the triple junction solar cells, which are very advanced solar cells used on satellites. And we were in the process of translating to crystalline. In terms of how we shifted, I would say more we were shifted. What we realized was that the coating technology in which we were housing or embedding these nanoparticles had some very interesting properties on their own. For instance, we discovered that it made glass twice as strong, and it had the ability to be highly tunable. And once this word started getting out, large OEMs started to approach us and said, well, that seems interesting. Solar's nice, but can you do this for us? And can you do that for us? And so, when looking at the solar industry, validation is a very long process. We were being presented with opportunities that had much shorter validation timeframes and that were more immediate opportunities. And so we're still working on solar, but we were, I guess, pulled along by more exciting potentials.
That's a great story. Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions that really refer to maybe advice for people who are just getting started. With your background in private equity, I'm sure that you've seen startups struggle or outright fail. Do you have advice for students or others that are thinking about starting a high tech or advanced materials company?
So, a few things. As you know, experience is the best teacher. And, as a finance professional, getting involved in an industry is really the best way to obtain focused and specific knowledge of that industry. Going to trade shows, figuring out who are the players, the strong horses, the weak horses. I would say that it's very important to try to avoid rabbit holes, projects that have an adverse cost-benefit ratio. Keep in mind, when you raise money, you're a steward of that money. And if you want to make an investment for your investors, 5x or 10x, which is to say 5 times or 10 times or more of their investment, it's important to do that not only on the grand scale, but also on the smaller scale. So before you get involved in even a small specific project, determine whether that project is worth not only the cost, but many more times the cost and the time and the resources it will take to complete. As founders, we look at ourselves as supplicants looking for financing and, in essence, quote unquote, begging for money with hat in hand. But the truth is, really, VCs and private equity funds and professionals, they are desperate to put money to work. They have tremendous pressure to do so. Their jobs are on the line, and they have a tremendous amount of money to put to work. But you have to check the right boxes first. That's good idea, a good concept, a fantastic management team, differentiating factors, compelling technology, scalability, etc. If you can check those boxes, the money is virtually unlimited. And I'd say one final thing that is also, I think, made a big difference for me is you read about in newspapers, magazines, you see all these big names, and Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and it's important to understand that they were all where you are right now at one point. They're in a small office or a garage or whatever it is, they were there. There was nothing about them that was predestined at birth that they should achieve great things. I think their greatest achievement was that they built a company whose dynamics were consistent with their personalities. That's why they can execute and make it look relatively easy, because it's really an extension of themselves.
That is really great and inspiring advice. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. We know that young companies have their ups and downs along the technology development pathway, taking a research idea into commercialization. Can you share a strategy or a decision that you made along the way that in hindsight you would have done differently?
Just one. Right. Yeah, everybody's got those, and I guess that's always part of the process. I would say that our primary setback was a little bit counterintuitive. Our problem was too much of a good thing. Some folks might shoot me for saying this, but we were very fortunate in that we received a disproportionate amount of positive feedback and attention from very large OEMs of Fortune 500 companies. And we took on too many projects at the same time when we should have been more focused. Look, it's hard to say no. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline when a $20 billion company comes knocking to say, it's really not for us. I can't do this right now. I think sometimes we went out on a limb too much, and right now we really brought it closer to about three products, which is probably one more than we should be doing, but it really is focused around our core competencies and our core technologies that we've developed. Sometimes you have to work smarter, not harder. And I'm not working as hard as I was 6 months ago, but we're doing better.
Well, maybe that means you found a little balance. So your offices are in New York City, but you produce in St. George, Utah. Can you tell us how that came to pass and how that works for you?
So it really has to do with myself and the co-founder. He was a scientist who has a love of business, and I'm a businessman who has a love of science. And so, he developed really the core of the R&D. Did it together, but he was spearheading it, and he lives out there. And I was developing the business side, and I live here and work in downtown New York City. I would say overall that it works very well. We wanted to have robust technology, that would sell itself, but also to be able to communicate that in a compelling and very dynamic way. So having the New York's expertise and background and presentation and branding, along with serious technical chops coming out of the West Coast facility, is a really great fusion, and it makes for a fantastic 1-2 punch. And it's really been working well for us.
Well, that's great. That's a great combination that you described there. So we've come to the end of our time today, and I really appreciate you taking this time this morning to talk with us. Do you have any other closing thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I feel like I said too much. But look, there are profound changes coming, and I think if we open our eyes and see what's out there, I think we're living in very exciting times. And I think we really underestimate. I mean, look at the internet. It changed the world within 5, 6, 7 years. So new technology can really have profound effects in a very short amount of time. And we could see another phase like we had from 1900 to 1969. We could see another phase of development in our engagement with the physical world, which hasn't really changed since for the last 40 years. We could start to see some really amazing things, and maybe we'll see some flying cars.
Thank you for joining us today for this story from the NNI. If you would like to learn more about nanotechnology, please visit www.nano.gov or email us at info@nnco.nano.gov. And of course, check back here for more stories.